click one of the links from our social studies blog, and you will click, let's see, this particular link right here, it's a table of contents for the background of the War of 1812. When you click that link, it will bring you to, oops, closing glare, here we go, this particular page here, and you will see a table of contents. And what I need you to do is click where it says American Expansion Policy. So you will click American Expansion Policy. And we've already talked about how the United States is starting to expand west. We had Daniel Boone crossing through the Appalachian Mountains, widening the Cumberland Gap, which made way for more settlers to come through. Enough settlers came through to Kentucky, where they had enough people living there that they could create the state of Kentucky. So he was one of the first people to help pave way for expansion. Then in 1787, as you can remember, we had the Northwest Ordinance, which created the Northwest Territory. As more people moved into that land there, then we were able to turn more of that particular area into states. So here's an American perspective of the American expansion policy. And you're going to read this much like you do with the junior grade books. You're going to read, you're going to take notes, you can highlight. And some of the things that I want you to do as you read through this, I want you to talk to yourself, talk to your group mates about this. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about what I mean. So I'm reading American Perspective. America was growing by leaps and bounds in the late 18th century. The burgeoning white population was pushing westward in a frantic search for farmland. I have to stop and think, burgeoning, I wonder what that means. So that would be something, and I would mark with a V for vocabulary, because I really need to figure out what that means. By 1810, there were more than 230,000 people living in Ohio, about 400,000 people living in Kentucky, and more settlers were pushing into Indiana and Illinois. The U.S. government promoted settlement in order to extend the boundaries of the new country. Some parcels, of land were given away to reward Revolutionary War veterans. Others were sold at very reasonable prices to encourage Americans to set up homesteads in new territories. Homesteads. I'll go look that up. Once a territory had at least 60,000 inhabitants, it was eligible for statehood. Wow, look at that. 60,000 people, and it could become a state. So we have 400,000 people living in Kentucky. No wonder that became our 15th state. We have 230,000 people living in Ohio. I guess that's eligible to become a state. That's cool. All right, I want to keep reading. But there were questions regarding the First Nations. First Nations, I wonder who that is. Who lived on the desired land. President Thomas Jefferson and his administration earnestly believed that these nations should be civilized and taught how to set up their own homesteads on plots of cleared land granted to them by the U.S. government. Jefferson reasoned that white people had a responsibility to assist the native peoples by teaching them how to survive in mainstream society. Mainstream society, what does that mean? I think I'll put a V for vocabulary there. And I think I realized that native peoples, that must be who the First Nations are. So they must be the Native Americans. Okay. Several religious groups supported the American government's philanthropic efforts. Ooh, goodness gracious. Hardly say that. I wonder what that means. I'll have to go back and figure that one out. On a less altruistic note, another vocabulary, Jefferson hoped that declining returns from the hunt would persuade First Nations to sell their land and migrate further westward. So he wants the Native Americans to sell their land so we can take it over and then hope that they will continue to move west. But if they move west, we'll probably have to push them out again because we know that we want to own all this land up to the Pacific Ocean. Oh boy. Okay. He also hoped to accelerate this process by encouraging natives to run up debts with traders. These debts could then be settled by ceding land to the U.S. Many First Nations people continue to put up a fierce resistance, another vocabulary word, resistance, to the incursion, two vocabs in one sentence, of white settlers. Let me go back. Many First Nations people continue to put up a fierce resistance to the incursion of white settlers. The Americans replied with a series of punitive expeditions. Ooh, I know what an expedition is. Lewis and Clark just went on one. In 1811, tensions between America and Northwestern First Nations culminated in the Battle of Tippecanoe. Ironically, Americans believe that it was British agents who were responsible for inciting the First Nations to resist. Ooh, inciting, resist. They failed to recognize that their own selfishness in denying them rights to their land and culture was the cause of provocation. Ooh, all right, so now I'm going to have to reread this whole thing and try and figure out what some of these words mean. And if I can't figure it out by reading it, I'm going to have to actually look these up, because I know this is important information. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go back and reread it and try and make sure I understand all of this. When I'm done, my group mates and I, we will go ahead and rewrite some of the facts that we just learned.